Oh, hi there, gang. Let's talk about fixing our lives, shall we? Cover professionalism today, the aspects of professionalism, what it takes to be a professional, how it's defined, um, motivations for that, and hopefully I can illustrate the two primary lessons of ethics and professionalism. So there are a couple aspects of professionalism outlined in most ethics courses for professional leaders and people in professions. So altruism, respect, and leadership. And then there are some subcategories of that go into the motivations, how we make judgments, what our obligations are, how we perceive things, how others perceive us, that id, ego, superego dynamic, schemas and heuristics we use to assess the world, to make sense of the world around us, to make sense of others' reaction to us, our reaction to others, what other even means in a given context. So, depending on the schema, depending on the environment that you're in, other can mean completely different things. And one of the important lessons of that is if if you identify with a particular group, that's in group. You consider yourself in group. Anyone perceived to be in opposition to that in group that you now identify with, or you advocate on behalf of, or you empathize with, becomes other, and that causes that leads to animosity toward the other. So empathy, in many ways, particularly if it's the default setting, to rush to empathy, to rush to relating to the experience of another, accepting it as valid, and then self-identifying with the target of that empathy, let's say. So empathy isn't good. Empathy isn't bad either. It's like a handgun. The handgun does nothing on its own. It exists, and the tool, because it's neutral, can be used for both good and evil. Douglas, hello. So, and then there's tacit knowledge, which I'll get into. A profession just means that you have complex knowledge. You're a subject matter expert, or you're on your way to becoming a subject matter expert, and understanding that you'll never perfect your skills. You'll never be beyond reproach. You'll never hopefully you have a standard, an idealized standard in your mind that you'll never reach, and that keeps you clawing for it, keeps you driving forward in pursuit of that expertise. And within that same definition of a profession, you have service to others, which is another criteria for being in the group professional, and a code of conduct. So whether that is along the same lines as the Hippocratic Oath in medicine, or you have a duty to put service before self, or to place the desires of others before personal comforts. How about that, Dom? Hello. So altruism, this is a popular idea, especially in the military. It's one of the core values of the Air Force: is service before self. It's in the pararescue motto. It's in many business mission statements and things like that. It just means service before self. It means that there is no expectation of reward that drives you to engage in an act. You don't seek anything in return. I had a discussion in a psychology class my first semester at UWF, and this happens often where I'm the only person taking a particular position because maybe I'm an asshole. I know I'm disagreeable, but I don't know that true altruism exists. And what I mean by that, we get a reward whether we want it or not. If we move up social strata, if I give someone some change, if I do a favor for someone, even if I'm not expecting anything, I get a dopamine release. That dopamine release tells me that a reward is coming. And then I get serotonin. So I get an internal reward. Intrinsic motivation drives that behavior. So perhaps altruism can encompass all extrinsic motivators, anything that's environmental that motivates me to engage in an act. But if I'm being rewarded internally, is it truly altruistic? And the professor yielded to some degree, but the others in the class were unwilling to accept that we don't ever do anything without reward in mind. And my point was that you don't have to have it in mind. You're getting a reward whether you want it or not, and that reward, that chemical signal, that feel-good hormone, makes you likely to engage in that behavior again and again because you were rewarded. It's instant gratification. Dark altruism. I think I've pretty much covered this. I have good intentions. I empathize with who I perceive to be the victim, and the moment I empathize with them, the problem is that I've otherized everyone else. I've made myself one with the oppressed, and anything outside that category is now oppressor. I've identified myself with victim. Anything outside that category is now victimizer. And that's a dangerous place to be, particularly in a profession, particularly in a leadership position in a profession. Anyone outside the team, this could be a team of 6 people within a corporation with, let's say, the executive branch of government has about 3 million employees, if you include the Department of Defense. So think about the president, Donald Trump, as the CEO of a corporation with 3 million employees. That's a big undertaking on a daily basis. I would never want that job. But anyone outside of that corporation, at that level, you have 350 million people, that's the corporation. But at a team level, where there are only 5 of you on your team, anyone outside that team is now other. So you have this in-group preference that's so narrowly focused that you are often unable to empathize with anyone outside that group, and it causes animosity toward anyone outside that group. So competition does drive success, but it's important to understand that we're predisposed to be tribal, and once we identify with a group, everything outside is everything outside. It's everything else. It's not me. It's not self. So they talk about virtues as well in an aspect of professionalism, and that's conformance to moral standards. So again, this is something that in the West, if you impede on the freedom, property, life of the individual, it is perceived as immoral in this society. But in other societies, because of the way we form our own moral code, something that's moral in one society may be completely immoral in another society. Child marriage, for example, is something that we reject wholly. That's a taboo topic in the West. But there are cultures around the world that engage in arranged marriage and child marriage and things we find despicable. But it's because we shape our own morals. There's plenty of outside influence, plenty of internal influence in that, but it's complicated. So the widely recognized virtues, universally, regardless of culture, wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence. And so justice is the most intriguing one to me out of that, because of what I said earlier about those dark virtues, dark altruism. If your in-group is the victim in some way, or you perceive them to be the victim in some way, justice means something completely different to you than the next layer of analysis beyond your in-group. So justice is subjective. It's sort of like equity. Equity is the perception of fairness. It is not equality. That's a different word. Equity means that I believe, I perceive that everything is fair right now. I perceive that everyone has an equal shot at getting a piece of candy on Halloween. I perceive that everyone has an equal opportunity to access books in the library. I believe all these things. So that's equity based on my perception. If I am tremendously wealthy, let's say, and I have access to all of the things that we have here in the United States, and the out group is anything that's outside the United States, I might perceive that everyone has an equal opportunity to access all of the things that I have access to because, again, within my in-group, we all have access to this information, but anyone outside doesn't. So there's a disparity in equity there. The equality is actual because you can access the in-group through a process, and then you can have access to the things the in-group has access through a process. But there's a disparity in equity given the perception of the out-group, perception of the in-group. And depending on where you fall there, your idea of equity and whether something is equitable is right or it's wrong. It's a 1 or a 0. Conscientiousness. This is something that's huge for professionals, and this is something I talk about pretty frequently. It's a character trait. Conscientiousness is broken down into 2 subcategories, industriousness and orderliness. Industriousness is a hard worker, basically. How hard are you willing to work if given sufficient meaning in the work that you're doing, if given a goal that's sufficiently enticing, if your motivations are proper, how industrious are you? And then orderliness, it's self-explanatory, I think, but are you likely to keep your things clean? Is your kit clean, Drew? Is your fucking room clean? Is that Ducati clean? Are you the kind of person that takes care of the things around you and likes to have an ordered system, a planned day, a schedule, and things like that? People who are higher in orderliness are more likely to do those things. People lower in orderliness are less likely. People who are both low in orderliness and low in industriousness are going to be low in trait conscientiousness. Quite simply, and this is another one of these Air Force core values, as hilarious as that sounds, integrity first is the first core value of the Air Force. And integrity, in a very simple way, is doing what's right regardless of whether anyone's watching. So are you likely to behave appropriately according to the rules of your society that our moral code, even when you're not being directly observed? What do you got? Communism, do your job because you're passionate about it. Don't care about income because we're all equal. Yeah, you're right, Drew. That's exactly how it goes every time. Everyone, once they're all being paid the same, works even harder. The neurosurgeon still works 70 to 80 hours a week for the same pay that the street sweeper makes. Cacciatore, hello. Yeah, that's exactly how it goes, Drew, and you're all too familiar. So the motivations for professionalism, the motivations that drive us to exhibit these traits, self-control, conscientiousness, the virtues that I outlined, wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, transcendence, that drive altruism, the movement up dominance hierarchies, and that chemical reward, that intrinsic reward is what causes us to engage in these behaviors. And there are requirements for those motivations to manifest. And one of those, conscientiousness, is something that's born into us. Your personality is shaped almost entirely by the age of 4, maybe 5, depending on your speed of development. So genetically, you are sort of handed a deck of cards. Like, here's how open you're going to be. Here is how conscientious, extroverted, agreeable, neurotic you're going to be. And your environment, especially during those first 4 years, shapes those things to varying degrees. Now, it's not as if you're going to be born highly volatile, and then if your parents are great, you're at a 0 for volatility. You're in the 1, 2, 3 percentile. It doesn't work that way. You'll get some deviation, but there's a standard deviation for these character traits. So the motivations for appropriate behavior pretty much universally are status, conscientiousness, and deferral of gratification. And some things that... So status, what I mean is we're all very sensitive to status. And this, I'll use Jordan Peterson's example. Crustaceans, lobsters. We diverged from crustaceans billions of years ago. they have the same nervous system loop. How do I make this simple? They have the same process in their brain, basically, that provides a chemical reward in exact... 6 hours a wanker. Hey, Brandon, thanks, man. He fuck that guy. But so lobsters are in tune with their peers. Basically, they have a very intuitive sense of their status in relation to their peers. And in crustacean terms, in lobster terms, that's access to food, access to mates. This old brain drive that we share. Again, this is the same structure, the same function we share with crustaceans. And it's been intact for billions of years. When a lobster loses a fight, it cowers, it shrinks up, its shoulders, its head's down, its chin's tucked. When you see someone who is, let's say a bully, I've seen this happen with bullies many times. Someone thinks that they're tough, right? And the moment someone challenges that, the moment someone makes direct eye contact and refuses to be pushed by a bully, the bully shrinks and the posture changes. And just like Drew, where whenever he's around other men, he can't make eye contact with anyone, and he's scared all the time, and his tail's in between his legs. That's the way Drew acts around men, because he's scared. He's scared he might be gay. It's okay, Drew. We're already friends. So lobsters, when they win the fight, boom, big posture. And their shells actually grow in response to that dopamine and serotonergic drive. So winning a fight gives you more access to mates, more access to food. We share the exact same structures, the exact same serotonergic drive as these crustaceans from which we derive. We what's the fucking word? Anyway, branched off billions of years ago. So status is your position relative to your peers, and even those that aren't your peers. We're so connected now. It's like fucking Rihanna. I'm comparing myself to Rihanna and stuff. So your peers, your comparison in relation to those peers is status. And based upon that status, you have more access to reproductive actions, let's say, whether you're male or female, and you have more access to resources. In the lobster's case, that's food, territory, etc. So what's required? Conscientiousness, deferral of gratification. Deferral of gratification is something that comes along with high IQ. Moderate to high IQ people are more likely to pass the cookie test than people who are moderate to low in IQ. I put a cookie in front of you. I put a cookie in front of a child, and I say, if you don't eat this cookie, in 10 minutes I'll give you a second cookie. They don't eat the cookie, they get the second cookie. They deferred gratification for, let's say, 10 minutes, just sitting there staring at a cookie, just wanting to eat it, but knowing there's a second cookie coming if I wait. The children that wait reliably have higher IQ than children who don't wait. Those children are also reliably higher in conscientiousness, in industriousness, orderliness, and more likely to be successful across time. So that cookie test is something you can do to determine your child's ability to defer gratification. And this is a high functioning tool in your brain to be able to say, okay, here's me 10 minutes from now with 2 cookies in front of me. I can become me with 2 cookies in front of me if I simply let this cookie sit for another 10 minutes. So that's an abstraction and then an additional abstraction to map the course from point A to point B. That's a high IQ skill. For a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old to be able to defer gratification for 10 minutes is tremendous. Most children will not do it. Most children are not high in conscientiousness. And most of us are lower than 110 in IQ on a global scale. So some things that get in the way of that, And well, actually, there are more motivations, and these are external motivations. So you have fear of reprisal. If you do this thing, you're going to be punished for it. Status, again, if I do this thing that I know is improper, I may lose status. Sam, Jorge, what's up, guys? Losing status is just as potent a driver as gaining status. And the intrinsic reward, which I've already discussed, which is what the justification I would use to say that there is no true altruism, because we get a reward whether we want it or not, whether we're thinking about it or not. We receive a reward, and that becomes part of our schema of the world. And I keep using that word. Schema is just a cognitive representation of the world, that abstraction. Here's the ideal world. I'm sitting at the table with 2 cookies in front of me instead of 1. I have a schema. If my schema is accurate, this map I've drawn between now and then is ideal. And if I behave in such a way that it draws me the direct course from point A to point B, that's ideal as well. So my schema, when I'm sitting in point B with 2 cookies in front of me, it validates the schema that I have. It tells me that the conception I have of the world, this representative model of the world that I've constructed, is accurate, because my behavior brought about the outcome that I want. My actions bring about the outcome that I want from others: the respect, the status, the admiration, the others' desire to be around me, and vice versa. If my schema is correct, that representation is correct, I should stay on the course between point A and point B. Respect. Let's see. The only requirement, and this is another aspect of professionalism, the only requirement that helps the brain work better when we help people who cannot pay us back. Yeah, that's a funny thing. So it brought to mind, I don't know if this is exactly what you're getting at, but it brought to mind something that Benjamin Franklin was known for, that when he would meet people for the first time, he would ask them for a favor as opposed to doing something kind. And when you've already done a kindness for another, again, because of that chemical reward, when you've already done someone a kindness, you're more likely to do that kindness again, statistically. So Benjamin Franklin's a brilliant man. He's got a great first name. He knew that if he got someone to extend him a kindness at the outset, they now associate that positive brain chemistry with him, and they're more likely to engage in that in the future. And obviously it needs to be reciprocal. So that person may or may not ask you for a favor, but you have to be open and receptive to that. And what goes around comes around. Friends don't keep score, but your brain, your nervous system is keeping score, whether you're doing it consciously or not. Brian, hello. So the professional aspects of this, you have to respect people. You have to respect yourself. You have to respect others. And the only requirement for that respect, the only prerequisite, is human. If you're human, you're worthy of respect. This is not a complicated idea. It's not an unpopular idea, but many people are willing to jump past that as a principle to say, again, that in-group, out-group. If I'm readily able and willing to dehumanize out-group. And what does that do? It eliminates the requirement for respect between in-group and out-group. If that group is doing something I believe to be horrific, anti-human, anti-my group, they're no longer worthy of respect, and that's not an aspect of professionalism. You should conduct yourself in your professional life and your personal life as a professional. And however, human is not a qualifier. It is you treat people as nicely as you can the first time you meet them. And if they demonstrate that they are not worthy of respect by treating you poorly, treating others poorly, being a slob, any number of negative character attributes you can imagine, if time and time again they don't live up to your expectations for a human, and again, this has to be something that's objectively determined, not through emotion, that person can disqualify themselves for the respect from you. You don't have to respect people, blanket statement, period. you don't have to respect everyone all the time. People can lose respect, and this is a bank that it's difficult to pay back into. It's just like trust. How do you win this game? How do you win the professionalism game? Be likable. Be honest. Be the person that you would want to be around. Honor your commitments, and if you have kids, if you have family, try and make those people the kind of people others would want to be around. It's relatively simple. Rex, hello. And here's something that shapes that. Again, that schema. If this is what I think people like, if this is what I think is appropriate for the world within my shell, within my schema, and it's not, I'm kind of fucked. Especially if I'm influencing other people to behave in a way that is consistent with my schema. This isn't working. This light's coming in my eyeballs. So you can have an inaccurate map of the world. Your schema can be a misrepresentation, and now you're behaving in a way over and over, expecting an outcome, and that outcome never comes, and you don't understand it. It fractures that schema, and instead of being between point A and point B, you're somewhere else, and you can't map the world because you're refusing to accept that you're no longer in this place. Once you've deviated from the path, or once you realize that the expected outcome, the second cookie is not coming, once you realize that, you have to reorient yourself and say, okay, fuck, I had something wrong here. One of my presuppositions was incorrect. Otherwise, I would be enjoying a second cookie right now. So if the world doesn't meet my expectations over and over and over again, I'm constantly running into a wall. Perhaps the problem is not with me. Perhaps the problem is not with the world. Perhaps the problem is the way I conceptualize the world that governs my behavior and my interaction with it. So the problem could be with any one of those things or all of those things. And a way to gauge that is, am I winning? Am I winning the game? And those steps: be likable, be honest, honor your commitments, be someone other people want to be around. And something people tend to do, I'm guilty of this myself, is focus on their accomplishments, self-aggrandizement, this ego feeding, and that's boastfulness. This is not a professional trait, Barb Solo. This is not a professional trait, bragging about accomplishments. But there's a distinction to be made here. Boasting is not saying, I won the Medal of Honor last year, and I'm really proud of that. Let's say I didn't win the Medal of Honor. That's an achievement. That is significant. That is something that if you tell others about, if you put that on your resume, if everyone around you knows that, you're not boastful, because that's huge. But if you're waking up to announce to the world that you pooped today, that's not an accomplishment. That is boasting. So I'm exaggerating to clarify Medal of Honor versus pooping, but anything in between there, if you're trying to get other people to acknowledge your every accomplishment, that's boastfulness. Trying to be recognized for accomplishments that are indeed significant. Maybe you're overweight and you've changed your diet and you've started seeing results, and you've only lost 3 pounds. That's an accomplishment, because it's not just the 3 pounds that you lost, it's the behavior change that's part of that. And that's huge. Hey, Mom. So that's how you win that game. Aspects of professionalism: sensitivity, motivation, judgment, and ability. I went over these already, but that schema idea, without self-knowledge, you might understand the path between point A and B. You might understand point B very well. You might understand who you are at point B when you're getting that second cookie. But where you are now, if you don't understand yourself, and this is, I'm getting into this heavier and heavier, and getting by with a little help from my friends. Self-knowledge, self-exploration, introspective thought, understanding my faults and my virtues, and there are far more faults than virtues. Self-knowledge is a requirement for engaging in appropriate action. How you can't determine what the appropriate action is for you to engage in without knowing your abilities, without knowing your weaknesses, without knowing your virtues, without knowing everything that could cause you to deviate from that path between A and B. So fear of reprisal isn't often enough. These negative motivators, negative. And the loss of status and maybe the intrinsic reward is not enough. So you need to set things out there that are external motivators for you sometimes. Brandon, hello. And this comes back to these IQ skills, but pattern recognition. This comes from attentiveness. So 2 separate examples here. Self-knowledge first. When is the last time you sat alone for an hour and just thought and examined the things that come to mind as they come to mind? This is all meditation is. Something comes to mind, acknowledge it, accept that it's transient, and let it go. And go back to thinking about what you are, thinking about where you are, what you're doing, being present in exactly the moment that you're in. How often do people do that? And then we have a tendency to say that because things aren't working out for me, it's everyone else. It's traffic. It's this red light. It's the slow people at the food service establishment. All of the problems I'm experiencing, my consistent deviation from that path, has nothing to do with me. Of course it doesn't. I don't even know myself. I have no idea about all of the patterns and repetitive behaviors that are causing me to slip again and again and again. Without that self-knowledge, there's no way for me to accurately map the world. And without mapping the world, there's no way for me to understand, based upon an accurate self-concept, how I arrive at point B. How do I get from here to there, given my aptitudes, given my being, my person? How do I get me from here to there? It's different moving a bicycle and a boulder from point A to B. One's significantly more difficult to move and is going to require a different set of tools to get to point B. That bike, I just roll it along. So differences in ability, differences in intellect, differences in so base intellect, morality, what sort of moral system did you grow up in, and your intelligence. Like these things really matter, and our society seems to be going in a direction where we are trying to force the acceptance that we are all identical, that we all have equal everything, that we're all equally intelligent, we're all unbiased, we're all the same, just this gray puddle of human. When we know that's not true, think of the person who is most like you, and you can immediately think of a difference between you and the person who is most like you in the world. Granted, you haven't met everyone, but there's no one like you. There's no other you. That's the revelation of Western culture, is that, well, we can group these people into group hominid, group Homo sapien, group Neanderthal, group Asian, group white, group Democrat, whatever. But if I try and form solutions for problems associated with those groups, I'm missing everything in the group that I'm not immediately analyzing. So I narrow my focus such that all I can see is that group. And everything outside of it is irrelevant. And because of my psychological shortcoming, Kyle, hello, because of my own psychological shortcomings, I have animosity toward anyone outside that group, even if I'm just studying it objectively. I have in-group and out-group preference. So I narrow my focus to just female progressives. Then I try and form solutions for how to get female progressives to believe that there is equitable distribution of hilarious hats. So now I have to tweak the system in ways to ensure that these people feel like they're getting equal access to funny hats, but I'm ignoring everyone outside of that group. My schema is too narrow for me to be able to affect change that will bring about an appropriate point B. From the very start, my schema is incorrect, my self is incorrect, and my point B is incorrect because I'm looking at too narrow a view. If you expand that to encompass everyone, the conclusion you arrive at is that you have to consider the individual. It's difficult. It's very difficult. If you've ever tried to help someone get off drugs or alcohol, if you've ever tried to help someone turn around their finances, if you've ever helped someone try to lose weight or get their life together, or pick a goal, just any goal, a 5-year goal, 10-year, 20-year goal. What's your goal for tomorrow? It's difficult to help people. It takes a tremendous amount of resources, tremendous amount of time, tremendous amount of effort, and a tremendous amount of empathy to fully understand a person who doesn't even understand themselves, and then help them map a course forward. This is the job we give to high school counselors with a bachelor's degree. And we expect them to be able to shape people whose parents don't even know themselves into fully actualized human beings and set them out into the world to go and get $100,000 in college debt for a fine arts degree. Self-knowledge is critical. Fear of reprisal, status, intrinsic reward is not enough. And that pattern recognition in the world, and that pattern recognition of the self is crucial. Hello. Recognizing patterns in yourself, self-knowledge. Recognizing patterns in others, recognize patterns in the world, helps you build a proper schema and properly orient yourself within that. What's a joke-ish? So that cookie test again, there are environmental cues that let you know that your schema is appropriate, and there are signals within that environment that validate your schema, and the ones that do, the ones that confirm this is a joke-ish. The things that confirm our biases, the things that confirm the way we already feel, are most likely to be encoded into that schema we've formed in our brain, this abstraction of the world. So, again, that self-knowledge is so critical, and pattern recognition is so critical, because anything that tells me what I want to hear, I'm more likely to encode that than something that does not confirm my beliefs, the way the education is set up. Yeah, you're exactly right, Ish. We have a Prussian model, which I want to say I heard you talk about the other day, perhaps. But we have a system that's designed to make compliant, manipulable factory workers. And people don't see that, I guess, until they try and fix it. or they are considering putting their children in school. And if they're making an informed decision about that, they don't want their children in public school, because public school will make them factory workers. It'll make them Play-Doh to be pushed through a mold, and they come out into a job at, I don't know, somewhere putting this in this, and then doing this. And then their job's automated within a month. So we're setting people up for failure. We need to teach people to think critically. Philosophy, mathematics, history, and science. Anything beyond that, that's electives. Do that on your own time. And maybe finance and economics. But if you can think critically, I think you can understand economics. So, final 3 things about this for professionalism, and these are just common sense. Tacit knowledge is knowledge that can't be verbalized, and this is something I've talked about frequently, especially since I started listening to these Sam Harris and Peterson debates, the idea of truth versus fact, which I'm not going to get into right now, but there is some knowledge that can't be verbalized. My daughter's in private school and she's doing it. Well, yeah, dude, it's private. It's private for a reason. The market decides what's good in the private market. Public market, we just keep paying for it whether it works or not. Weapons of mass education, John Gatto. I'll check that out, Rex. Thank you. there are some things that can't be verbalized, and this is where we get mythology, this is where we get religion, this is where we get novels. There are things that if you try to explain them to someone, it's not possible. The moment you attach a word to it, it changes its meaning. Paul said this to me one time about the Tao, the eternal Tao. The first rule of the Tao is you don't talk about the Tao, because the thing you're pointing at can't be pointed at. And the moment I pin it down, it changes. It's like measuring an electron. Josiah, what's up, man? If I want to measure a particle, I have to fire a laser at it and measure the refraction pattern, or measure the speed at which it bounces back, or measure the depth to which my laser moves that particle. But I can only do it right now. And the moment I hit that particle with the device I'm measuring it with, whatever that mechanism is, I've changed its energy. I may be inverted. I may be switch the polarity of the charge around the atom. So the moment I measure the thing, it moves and it's something else. I have a helium balloon on a string, and I have a ruler, and I'm trying to measure the helium balloon. But every time I touch the balloon with the ruler, it moves away. So that's this idea of tacit knowledge. I know something, but I can't show you. I can't tell you. Practical intelligence is what I was talking about this whole time, basically, with professionalism. It's your ability to navigate life. If every time I try to get to point B, I don't make it, I don't ever get that second cookie placed in front of me in the cookie test, self-knowledge is required, obviously, because my schema is incorrect. My map of the world is incorrect. It's leading me to the wrong conclusion when I'm trying to. I don't ever take the time to triangulate. That self-knowledge and something else. Ben in the morning, yeah. Strong love news. Our truth, tacit knowledge, to some degree, ish. But so you understand this already, I think, and that phrase, my truth, is loaded with a lot of nuance. And if your truth is that all differences in outcome are the result of oppression, are the result of external factors, that truth is demonstrably false. So while you may feel that way, while it may be consistent with your schema, while it may confirm your biases, while it may seem accurate to you, it again, based on your individual experience, it may seem accurate to you that all difference in outcome is the result of oppression. It's demonstrably false. So if that is what you mean by your truth, then no, it's not the same thing. What I'm talking about, let's say, this is going to be a ridiculous example to give, but you walk into a room and you feel a vibe in that room, if you've experienced this, or like at a concert. Well, no, I won't go that way because there's a stimulus. You walk into a room and immediately your brain has taken in so much information a computer couldn't analyze it in a year. All of this visual information, all of the electromagnetism in the room, the temperature of the room, the smell of the room, what sounds are coming into your ears in that room. There's so much sense data that your brain can't tell you what all of it is in real time. You have to focus on a person, or focus on a sound, or think about what it is you're smelling. All of those things combined together cause a feeling, a gut feeling. I just walked in here and something doesn't feel right in this room. It puts me on guard. I'm thinking about where my firearm is and how I'm going to get to this firearm, let's say. I'm whatever. I'm on edge for some reason. We can't explain that feeling in the moment. Maybe later I write out everything that happened, what caused this feeling, and I recall there was a guy in the corner eyeballing me and like not moving naturally, let's say. So my brain picked up on something in that room that caused that feeling. But that gut feeling in the moment, I had no idea what it was. So that's more or less what I'm getting at with my truth. Like, it's something you can feel, but you can't explain. When people talk about the psychedelic experience, when people take DMT and person after person after person after person after person is confronted with this amazing, colorful fractal and feeling of love and acceptance, and there is a voice or a thing, what's his name? McKenna called them the machine elves, that are welcoming you in. And this is reliable across thousands of DMT experiences. We have no fucking idea why that happens. No idea. Because you're literally separating from your body and you're in a new place instantly. And that is inconsistent with our schema, the collective schema, that all reality is, it's solid. I can look and measure and smell and taste this reality. If your truth is a projection onto this reality, and you're telling me it's something that it isn't, that's not true. If you're telling me something that you're feeling, and that's what you mean by your truth, happy to hear it. Absolutely correct. Tacit knowledge is something that can't be explained, and the way we explain it is through story, mythology, film, movies, religion. We're explaining things that can't be explained, and we narrow it down as succinctly as we can, but we can't get it shorter than this many lines or with this amount of characters. I can't express this idea fully. I can use stand-ins and change the characters and the setting and all of that, but I can't get to exactly what I'm trying to say. I have to leave it to the audience to infer it. And hopefully they feel the same feeling that I did, that I tried to abstract and deliver. Practical knowledge, navigating life, triangulate. You have to know the goal, you have to know yourself, and you have to have an accurate schema of the world. Otherwise, you're not going to reach it. There's no trajectory that will land you in the bullseye there. And social skill, the ability to read people. And funny that you mentioned it, empathy. Empathy is your ability to understand the experience of others, your ability to sort of put yourself in their perspective, in their moccasins, so to speak. But it's a step further than that. Not only can you see things from their perspective, you have to be able to understand it and care about their perspective. Because if you're going into a conversation knowing everything and assuming that you know everything, why are you engaging? The caring part is the most important part of empathy. It's what makes it empathy and not feeling sorry for someone. I get it. Yeah, you're sad. I've been sad too. No. Caring about what that person is expressing to you is the fundamental aspect of empathy. Yes, I understand that perspective. And what can I do about it? Is there anything I can do about it? What can you do about it? Can we solve this thing together? That's empathy. And then courage. Courage is not rushing into a situation where you know you're going to be murdered. It's acting despite fear, because we all feel fear. Heroes aren't fearless. No one is fearless. It's a physiological response. It's acting in spite of that. I'm tremendously fearful, but I have people pinned down on a rooftop. I need to get out here, put suppressing fire down, and call for fire so that these guys don't die. And in the moment, I'm thinking about getting those guys and getting someone in here to drop bombs on that enemy position so that we can get back together and accomplish what it is we're here to do. So it's not a matter of having no fear. Everyone is confronted with fear. It's saying, fuck that. This is where I'm going. I need point B. So this fear is just impeding me. I can acknowledge it. Is this fear rational? Yes, obviously. This is dangerous. Is the reward worth the prospect of that danger? The risk-reward function. Hopefully that is helpful. Again, this is all schoolwork. I'm studying professionalism and ethics and psychology, motivations, and stuff like that. So enjoy. We'll see you, gang.